Okay, changes to the CD. There was a lot of misperception out there, probably caused by the CFPB themselves at the beginning, but you can and will most likely change the closing disclosure once it goes out in a same mechanism that you changed the HUD, only you'll be communicating those changes to the lender, or the title company will then have to communicate through the lender to make changes to the closing disclosure. But changes can and most likely will be made. That closing disclosure will go out, the buyer will look at it for accuracy, something may be added to it, we may have missed something, something may be put in there incorrectly, and changes will be made, and that's fine. The problem is, if the change made is one of these three things, it may trigger a new 3-day review period. In other words, we've got to start the whole ball rolling again on delivery and waiting. What are those things? If the change, whatever the change is, causes the annual percentage rate, or the APR, to be inaccurate. If the buyer changes loan product to, or a prepayment penalty is added, those are the three things. Okay, so as long as what the changes you're making to the CD don't do one of those three things, you're okay. The prepayment penalty, I'm not super concerned about a prepayment penalty. I don't think anybody is. Those are very rare, and that would rarely happen. The second one, a change in the loan product. They decide at the last minute they want to go to an ARM instead of a fixed rate. They want to go for a fixed to an ARM, or an ARM to a fixed. That's a problem. That's a change in loan product. So probably rare as well, but important to communicate to the buyer that last minute changes are going to cause delays. The more and most concerning one is the APR. Now, I don't know how to calculate APR. You don't know how to calculate APR. The lending community is the one who calculates APR, okay? But if you have a last minute change, obviously if you change sales price, if something affects the value of the home, if you have a seller credit that is large seller credit, all of those things could affect APR. Okay, and if APR is affected within too large, there's some discrepancy, there is some wiggle room depending on the loan product, but if it changes outside of that discrepancy, you change APR because you did something at the last minute, such as a change in sales price, a large seller credit, something else that changes the value of the land, then you may be triggering a new 3-day review period. Or, through absolutely no fault of your borrower, the lender miscalculates APR. They put a wrong number in there. They just do. And then a 3-day review period may be triggered. So this is what it says. Changes and adjustments affecting the value of the property as determined by the lender may trigger additional disclosures and review periods, both under this rule and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. So if you're talking about seller credits and things at the last minute, it's suggested you may want to schedule 2 walkthroughs, one 7 to 14 days out before you actually give them the data to prepare the closing disclosure, and another one at the last minute. Let's say the repairs that were supposed to be done were not done to the satisfaction of the buyer. And they say, okay, the repairs didn't get done. Give me a credit. Give me a seller credit for those repairs. You better call that lender, and you better make sure what it is you're doing, last minute changes, are not going to affect one of these things, or we've got another 3-day review period to run. I'm going to say here real quickly, let me just talk about the TREC forms. I know as of today's date, which is October 19th, TREC is looking into new forms. They're looking to making changes to the standard forms to deal with this particular issue. My understanding is as of today's date, those forms have not been finalized, but one of the things they're looking into doing is adding a provision that essentially would give an automatic extension of the contract should an additional review period be required under these TRID rules. Now there's some concerns about that. That's great for the buyer, right? An automatic extension. It's not so great for the seller necessarily. And how do you prove it? I'm concerned about proof as well. So the buyer comes and says, okay, seller, I have to do a new review period under TRID, so I need this automatic extension. And the seller says, well, give me some documentation proving that. And they say, oh, that's private. it's private financial data. I'm sorry, can't do that. They're right. So I'm not sure. I think the committee that's working on the forms has to think that through. What's the proof going to be? What's the mechanism for notice? And because as of the forms are written today, if there is some extension that's caused by this, if you go beyond the scheduled closing date written in the contract, because of one of these delays, you have to go back to the seller and ask for that extension. And the seller could decline to give that extension at this point. So I know TREC believes this is very important to address this issue here, and they are working on it.